was like, oh, thank you, America. Yeah, it's fantastic to be here, and as I said, some familiar names were popping up, some actors who've been in the Ordinalia before. Liz, it said Liz from Highlands, who played Pilot's wife, and she's sitting on a space hopper or something, bouncing up and down. So, you know, you don't often give talks to people on space hoppers, so that's lovely. Yes, thank you for that introduction. I'm the artistic director for the Ordinalia down in St Just for this 2021 cycle. I should just say, I think, Ian, you said I'm producing, but Marianne Bloomfield is producer. She is the font of all knowledge about every single aspect that's going on. She's wearing many different hats and having to coordinate with lots of different groups. So I'm artistic director, mainly involved with the creative side, you know, liaising with the props and set and costume and the music, and mainly essentially the actors. So I'm just going to start at the beginning. I thought I'd give you a little bit of I'm just going to try and move that little. This meeting is being recorded. Yes, first of all, apologies, PowerPoint. Crescent Kerno contacted me this morning and said, don't forget, if you want any slides on PowerPoint, you know, send them through now. And as I looked out of my camper van from a field in St Just, I thought, well, that's probably going to have to go by the by. So yes, so there's no PowerPoint, apologies. But we are doing this amazing production of the Ordinalia. I'm lucky that I've worked in a few different aspects of, I'd say, kind of medieval, modern medieval theatre. I've been involved in the 2000 to 2004 Ordinalia. I worked as assistant director with the great Dom Nutton, who was a friend of mine and directed the 4 plays. And I was also lucky enough to work in Heartlands with some children from Camborne schools on Boonan's Merry Azzik. So I've worked in mystery and miracle plays, I suppose. And I've also worked with the Perrin Porth posse crew for a couple of years on the St Piran's play. You know, on the dunes on St Piran's Day, freezing cold in March. Why he came in March, I don't know. If he'd come in July, I'd have enjoyed it so much more. So I've worked you know, quite a bit with community theatre, and I think it's probably the reason I'm working on this. It is my knowledge of having worked with Dom on I say 4 plays, I should say 3. It's the Ordinalias for trilogy, but the 4th year we did the full cycle, which was all 3 kind of condensed. And I must just say, I'm not a biblical or Ordinalia expert. I know lots of things around the Ordinalia and directing and, you know, scant knowledge of the Bible, but you know, I learn as I go. And what is so interesting about the Ordinalia, which I will, just for anybody who doesn't know what it is, I will kind of clarify in a moment, is that people are, you know, in the last couple of years, people are really passionate about it and quite protective over it, for whether that's for linguistic reasons or theatre or whatever, theatrical or whatever it might be. People have a little sense of ownership. It does form part of the backbone of the Cornish language, and it is a very powerful biblical stories. So just for anybody who doesn't know what the Ordinalia is, it's 3 plays, possibly the oldest trilogy of plays in Britain. Origo Mundi, the origin of the world or the creation of the world, is the first one. So that's Old Testament stories, very episodic. Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Moses, Noah, probably not in that order. And then we move on to Passio Christi, the Passion of Christ, and the 3rd play in the trilogy, Resurrectio Domini, the resurrection of our Lord. So they're obviously the New Testament plays. And those 2 plays at the end, they are kind of separate. It's likely Origo Mundi would have been performed, you know, a day or 2 just before the Passion. And I'm guessing that the Passion would have been performed on Good Friday, and then curtains closed or whatever happened. And on Easter Sunday, they would have performed the resurrection. It's likely. So the 3 plays, they're Christian stories. That in itself is a challenge. We live in a a largely secular society now, I suppose. I'm just popping something out there, but that seems to be more unlikely. So there's a challenge with the content. They are traditional, they're patriarchal. We our modern sensibilities now, sometimes we struggle with what's being said, what's being represented. So we've got to meander our way through that quite carefully. They're mystery plays, I would say, as opposed to miracle, in a sense that miracle plays are generally saints plays, like the life of St Mary Isaac or the life of St Key, Boonan's Mary Isaac, Boonan's Kay. And then the mystery plays down here in Cornwall are generally Bible stories. In the north of England, mystery plays might have been associated with the guilds. So York and Chester and Lincoln, the end town plays, they might have been more pageant wagon performances. So you might have, I don't know, the fishmongers might be doing Jonah and the Whale or something, and they might have their own pageant wagon. And the mystery is that or the mastery, they might protect their work. And so that's where that comes from, which is slightly different in Cornwall. I don't think, again, I'm not an expert, I don't think I've not come across much where specific guilds or crafts stage various sections of these stories. They're written, the Ordinalia is written in the Cornish language, Middle Cornish, with Latin stage directions. And I suppose from that, again, a lot of this is speculative, but you could say, all right, so if they're written by priests or scribes or clerics from supposedly Glasney College in Penryn, if you're going to stage them, you'd probably stage them all in the same language. So those Latin stage directions, there must have been two forms of people involved, as in modern theatre now, where you generally got your stage management and your actors. So we can kind of surmise that that might have been the case, that somebody was there just going, well, this is the scene, and now it's going to be acted by somebody in Middle Cornish or the Cornish language, to teach people the Bible stories, to take them from the confines of the church into these what we call pleningwaries, places of the play in Cornish, which are these round, again, I'm let's say nobody knows what this is at all, round amphitheatres, if you like, grassy space with raised banks, quite large to fit huge crowds in. I guess on feast days, I'll come back to why that might be the case, why I think that might be the case. So they were essentially to teach Bible stories, preach Christianity, but taken away from the confines of the church for people to talk in their own language down here in Cornish. So that probably gives a good sense of ownership as well, if you're speaking something in your own tongue. There's two pleningwaries really still in existence in Cornwall, which is St Just Ordinalia, which is in the heart of the community. I'm sitting in the Nut building now, which is a backstage resource facility specifically built to put on production for kind of housing, costume or set and bits of props for the Pleningwarie just outside. And the other one is Pirron Round, and Pirron Round is just near Perrin Porth, but it's not in the heart of the community, so I don't think there's as much connection to the players up there as there is probably with someone like St Just. St Just, people are just sitting there now, they're having their pasties, they're having a picnic, their kids are playing, people are just walking through from one place to another. So it's very much at the heart of the community, and again, there lies a few issues that people are protective of it, and people come in and you're doing some theatre, and that raises different challenges. The Ordinalia is different in terms of, if you went to the continent and saw something like Oberammergau or the big passion plays in Spain, Paseo de Alessa in Montserrat, there's these big stage, huge stage with the audience all sitting facing one way, is in the traditional proscenium arch theatre, and these amazing spectacles and pictures being created on stage. So you might have angels there and donkeys and sheep and hundreds of people, But to go to the next scene, you need to kind of close the curtains, have a total reset. 10 minutes passes by with a bit of nice music, and then the next picture comes up, and it's very much a spectacle, as is the Ordinalia. But the difference is it has what I would call an epic. You can use an epic technique, and just to kind of explain that a little bit more, I suppose, if you took a picture, you know, one of those medieval paintings with, for example, a knight and a damsel in the background, and they're having a conversation, and he's on his horse, and then there's a windy road into the foreground, and it's the same knight having a fight with a dragon. You can work out that story is very much a continuing story from you know, I'm going off to fight the dragon, I fought the dragon, and you know the knight will go back and everything will be fine. The Ordinalia works a little bit like that as well, in that you can stage different scenes. One scene can be building or finishing while another scene is popping up. In terms of staging, there are mansions, these little houses that go around the outside, and in there would have been characters like Pharaoh for Origo Mundi for the first play. You've got King David, you've got torturers, you've got Hell's Mouth, you've got Heaven, the Bishop's Mansion, and then you move to the Passion and Resurrection, which are pretty similar. You've got Caiaphas, Annas, Pilate, Herod, Tiberius in the Resurrection. So these little houses, and I'm guessing when the audience come along nowadays, we get them sit down in a spot, and you turn your head and see and watch the action. It's likely that audiences back in the medieval times, I'm guessing, would have wandered around and would have crowded round one of these mansions, one of these stages, and would watch the drama. Of course, you know, no microphones. We have float mics and radio mics nowadays to help the actors. But back then, you just had to pump out your voice and probably shout sometimes for people to hear. So it's likely that people might have gathered around a mansion, that scene would have taken place, and then they'd have wandered on to the next mansion, or you know, that's what I think might have happened. So we stage it slightly different now. But in that kind of epic quality, where you might have Pilate talking from a mansion over to Caiaphas on his mansion and Annas on his, we buy as an audience that they might be in 3 different places, but they can have this conversation right over the audience's head or across to the central stage, and it really keeps the energy and the dynamics flowing. It's quite powerful. And it might be Jesus is taken off to be, you know, questioned by Caiaphas, while this scene with Judas and Annas takes place somewhere else. So you can, there's no stopping, it's continually fluid, which is quite amazing. These are, and probably were, community plays. I don't know, obviously they were written by learned men from the church, and how many of those roles would have been taken by priests or scribes, I don't know. I don't know if there's any record of that, and how much by the community. But I think we can, again, assume, dangerous, but we can assume that if you're playing God, you're probably one of the most important people in the community. And if you're playing, I don't know, refugee number 5, it's probably your standing is slightly different. That doesn't reflect in nowadays. It's but there probably is a kind of a little parallel, but it does come down to who's available, who do we think fits that role, and how you know, in a casting or read through, how good are they? Are they going to find you know, if they've not done a lot before, you're probably not going to give somebody a lead role. The great thing about the Ordinalia, if we do keep it on a cycle, people can gradually build up, and quite often in community theatre, I've found that people come along and they might just want to carry the sword and be in the background, and then the following year they might want a few lines, the third year they might want a few more, and by the time they get to year 4, their confidence is sky high, and they go, yeah, give me a lead role, I'm ready for it now. So that's the great thing about these plays, and that if we do keep them as a cycle, you can grow through them. So it is quite a challenge at the minute. We're doing 3 plays. That hasn't been done since 1969 in Piran Round, and that was done by student group. And obviously, you can tell them when to turn up a little bit more, whether they did or not, I don't know. But with community actors, you're fitting very much around their lives. And if they say, I'm working a night shift on Saturday and I can't do Wednesdays, you have to work around that. So that is hard enough when you're just doing one play. When you're doing three, it becomes much more of a challenge. You know, the assistant directors who are, I don't know how they've done it, but the scheduling is now so tight that, you know, an actor will come in, the actor playing Peter, and we might rehearse the water picture scene for half an hour. They'll shoot on up the road to another venue and rehearse, you know, the washing of the feet, and then head over to do a refugee in the drill hall or something. So it's quite a logistical feat. And, you know, we're still now going, we've still got nobody cast in this role, you know, and we're in week 2. Let's crack on and find somebody or you know, who feels up for doing this. So in terms of, I suppose, going back to medieval times and how they might have performed these plays, one of the things is in 1381, I don't know, there was the Great Rebellion, the Peasants' Revolt, which was kind of in the eastern part of England, but probably gives us an idea what was a general lay of the land nationwide. And one of the things they were uprising about was freeing men from manorial bondage, kind of the abolition of serfdom, so that we know really if these plays are written in about the 1400s, 1390s, that might have been still a continuation. So that tells us you probably couldn't go to the Lord of your manor, Lord and Lady of your manor, and go, can I have a night off to go to rehearsal? They're rehearsing just down the road. It was probably highly unlikely. So I suppose there's a few things that means. Either it's a generational thing, and you pass on that tradition and learn, and somebody teaches those lines. Probably because a lot of the population would have been illiterate. That's an oral tradition. You know, I work as an actor, but I always work from a script, and I've never worked from somebody telling me the lines that I then have to say. So I don't know how that effective that technique is, but I'm guessing it would have been you know, it could have been that way of learning. It might have been. They have this character called the Ordinary, who supposedly went around. They were almost like the director, and they had the prompt copy, so they would go around and possibly whisper in actors' ears. I think that might be if they'd forgotten their lines, rather than whether they, you know, did that constantly through the play. And if that was the case, then, you know, if you've got God in heaven and Lucifer having a spat with each other, did they come down to the central playing space and do that so the Ordinary could whisper in both ear, or else the Ordinary is going to be whipping across the plain like crazy, trying to get up to heaven and then hell, and the play would probably gone on all day, which it might have. There might have been other pastimes and activities which the population at the time might have enjoyed. One of the things I suppose we don't know now is, you know, we look at the Ordinalia as a piece of theatre, but it was a religious festival, and how involved the audience got to be in the kind of the cathartic nature of this. If you'd come from a rural community where, although you're watching the seasons go by, you know, your life is very slow and kind of changes gradually. And then suddenly you're in the Plen and Gwory with these amazing mansions and people dressed in all this finery and these beautiful words coming out. You must get totally immersed in it. And if the character, the actor playing Jesus walks by, would you try and grab the hem of their cloak? Would you offer your child to be healed? You know, I don't know. We don't live in those times anymore, so it's difficult to know what effect and what did the church want at the end of that? Did they want people, you know, obviously it was to get them to go to church and continue to believe in these stories, but was there some kind of baptism there? You know, could you wander straight from her? Was a priest kind of shepherding you through the church door and to get blessed? I don't know, you know, but so we come at it very much these days as a theatrical community event. You know, for everybody, we've had quite dark times, and to bring people back into the light, to reconnect with old friends and new, and to be creative. It's good for the well-being. It is fantastic. We're laughing in rehearsal rooms, and where people are having fun and getting to know each other, and that's one of the main aspects of this, to bring a community together, to continue to bring communities together, to tell these ancient stories in whatever form we still want to do. I should just point out, I had a quick chat with somebody called Merv Davey the other day, who was responsible for the Lowender Perrin Resurrection production in 1996. And if you go onto YouTube, Lowender Perrin Resurrection 1996, I'm sure something will come up there. But what was interesting about that, when I chatted with him, I said, how did you rehearse this? And he said, well, people just rocked up on the day. And I suppose that would have been how it had originally been done. You would have your pipers, and they knew piping, and you'd have your singers, and they would rehearse singing, and you'd have your actors who, again, how they might have learned their lines, I don't know. And it kind of all just slotted into place. And it was very much, if you watch it, it's very much a festival feeling, and people wandered around and watched the plays. So no rehearsal, really just rocking up and doing these plays, and they're wonderful to see. We're doing it slightly different, obviously. It's ticketed, so people want high quality drama. So we've got 6 weeks of rehearsals in 3 different venues, 3 directors for each play, and 3 assistant directors. We've got musical, choir leader and band leader, and they're producing some absolutely stunning music. Amazing sets being made at the barn, Pharaoh's mansion taking shape, and Hell's Mouth. I mean, it really is. If you walk in there, there's a Noah's Ark in the corner, and there's all sorts of things being made. Upstairs and here in the Nut, there is just a whole bank, a whole wall of costumes, to cast these 100 people. And rehearsals, are pretty tricky. We've asked all the actors. One of the things we did say, look, to try and get 100 people, 60-piece choir, 15-piece band, and a whole production team safely to do this event, would you mind wearing masks even when we're acting? So for some of us, we've never seen the other person's face. There's going to be quite a surprise when they come to act outdoors and go, oh, that's what Peter looks like, and that's what Judas looks like. I knew it. So yeah, that's been quite challenging. I should just say, I'm just going to have a quick swig of water. I should just say, my interest started with medieval theatre before I really knew about medieval theatre. I was at Barnsley College doing a Leeds University degree, and for my dissertation back in '98, I looked at the similarities between early church liturgical theatre and Elizabethan theatre, and I tried to find what linked them. And the thing that kept coming up was the Cornish Passion plays. I was like, I'm from Cornwall, but I know nothing about these. And I wrote about it. And then probably a year later, I met Dom. We lived a couple of doors along from each other in Falmouth, so we were childhood friends. And he said, I'm directing the Ordinalia, Origo Mundi. Do you want to be assistant director? I'd done a little bit of work for him. I was like, yeah, hang on, I know that. I remember that from my dissertation. So it's been absolutely lovely to put theory into practice. Not everything you can put into practice because there are limitations on what we can do. There's loads of things which we would like to do this time, but we go, actually, to do all 3 from scratch is such a challenge that hopefully by 9 years' time, those things will be addressed or whatever. But one of the things I found interesting was, for me, was how they might have staged it, because in church drama, a lot of the medieval churches in Cornwall are from Norman times, and if you're looking down on them, they're kind of that cross or cruciform shape. They would have generally not all the time, but sometimes be built on an east-west axis, and that means that the altar is in the east and the font didn't used to be, but mainly in the west, and that nave, from the font to the altar, is the Christian journey from darkness to light, and the altar is normally associated with heaven. And if you think about natural light, the sun rising in the east pours through the eastern window and hits the font, and as the sun goes over, the light moves up the nave to the altar, and that's a Christian journey from darkness to light. The south side of a church is generally where a congregation comes in, or an audience in the case of theatre, and that's normally associated with paradise or the holy place. And then the north is sometimes associated with the devil's door. In medieval times, if you're being baptized, it might be they might open the door to let the evil spirits out of the child. There was lots of different reasons why they would use that door. But if you think about it physically and spiritually, when you're listening to the priest and you leave back out through south side, paradise or the holy place, you're turning your back, physically and spiritually on hell. And that link into the pleniguaries and something like the Ordinalia would have been similar. I don't know if these are the original entrances and exits for the pleniguary, but it's pretty much on the south-north doorways. So the audience normally come through the south side, and right in front of them is Hell's Mouth, and to the east is heaven. So those kind of, that orientation, the placing or facing of something towards the east, the orient, still, transferred itself from the church into medieval theatre and kind of into Elizabethan theatre, probably in a more subtle way. So that's kind of how my interest came about with this theatre, and like I said, getting a chance to put theory into practice. So we're doing all three plays. It's been a bit of a journey. I suppose myself and Mary Ann Bloomfield, who's the producer, we started on this, planning this about, I think it was June 2014. So it's been a roller coaster of a ride. And then a couple of years ago, Ted Lean, who's our project manager, got involved. And without both of them, it wouldn't have happened. Mary Ann has been the driving force and wanted to do all three and set the challenge. Can we do it? And there's going to be loads of learning experiences on the way. We won't get everything right, but we're going to give it a go. And Ted, without Ted, to funding applications and going back over them and editing them and reformatting them, it's just without Ted getting the money and Mary Ann kind of driving all of that through, it wouldn't be possible. And only then, once you've got the money, which we got from Cornwall Council, Arts Council and Heritage National Lottery Heritage Fund and some other smaller organisations, can you suddenly go, we've got the money, we've now got a year to go, can we do this? And it's been we've kind of bulldozed our way through and managed to get to this point where we're about just under a month before we open, just over 3 weeks, I think. So as I said, we rehearsed for 6 weeks, but if you think about covering every scene in a play, you literally get 6 goes at that scene. Miss one because you're self-isolating, miss another one because work's come up or something, you've got 4 times before you start running it and you're on stage. But with this kind of theatre, it is community theatre, and you work as hard as you can, and that's what you're going to end up with. So just to I think nowadays we've got possibly so many more challenges than they might have had in medieval times. The logistics in doing this, that would have been a yearly thing which they would have worked on and updated, and people who have painted bits and made bits of costume or whatever. So it would have been a generational progress, whereas now we're starting from scratch and we have to do risk assessments and chaperone licenses, and we've got a largely secular cast, and we're looking at the content, the language, obviously what we're showing. These are sometimes quite brutal stories, and also how our ancestors interpreted the world, and it's some people's very strong beliefs. So you're kind of balancing that out with people who are pagans, atheists, Buddhists, Catholic, Protestants. We've got everybody here, and they've come together to tell this story because they know it's important to tell, and it's important that community continues to tell these stories. Some people have said, you know, why you do? We did it 2000 to 2004, and it was great. Why are you doing it again? And the main reason for me is that it really is important that these stories continue to get told by different generations. Just because it's being done once, it doesn't matter, even if somewhere down the line that year isn't that good. The important thing is the community comes out and continues to tell these stories, which are, you know, if Cornish theatre practitioners or Cornish communities don't tell these Cornish stories, nobody from Somerset or Gloucestershire is, you know, they'll be telling their own stories. So it's up to us to keep them alive. In terms of where the where the company is now, as like I said, the set makers, they've produced these wonderful creations that are going to fill this pleningwarry quite spectacularly. The costumes are lovely. The music is all in Cornish language, and they've got a 60-piece choir for the I think 15 people for Origo Mundi, and then maybe another 45 is that for Passion and Resurrection, I think, and a 15-piece band. So it's all starting to come together. The actors are great. You know, they're really, you know, I don't know how they do it really. It's quite tricky. But one of the things we decided on before we even embarked on this project is, let's not do all this work and then for it just to fade away again. Let's really try and build something so there's sustainable, there's a legacy, and so that involves various things where so all the costumes can be used again. I made the decision, and obviously it's a kind of a group decision, but I said, look, is everybody happy that we do it as a very traditional telling, slightly different from last time? Only, again, it covers 3 plays, and also I have to think of directors in 6 years' time who might go, why did they do it? You know, set in a nightclub in Berlin in 1950, and they've got to continue to do that. You know, so it's a very traditional telling, but what that does is gives future directors and future companies, you know, a vast array of material. Scripts by Pauline Shepherd. Pauline's written the plays, adapted them, and you know, even in 20 years, you know, sensibilities change. The parallels are quite amazing. You know, 20 years ago in the, you know, insurrection, you know, and brutality and stonings or whatever it might be. Those things continue from thousands of years ago to the medieval times to now, where you're still going, wow, we're still telling the same story, plagues, you know, whatever it might be. So we've gone back to Pauline, and the directors have gone back in detail to look at the scripts. And then I just kind of made a little list of, before I kind of wrap up and see if there's any questions, is just a few things we've been looking at, discussed in the last few days, to give you a kind of flavour. That's final scheduling leading up to the opening night. Suddenly, because we've been sharing actors, if one director has everybody for Origo Mundi, what are the other 2 directors doing? Because a lot of players are in there, but we still need to rehearse our plays. So who can we prize out of that mix and go, can we just rehearse that scene? Because it's just needs a little bit of a tidy up. So that's quite a challenge. Spectacles for actors, you know, we've agreed, no, people just wear the, you know, glasses. Let's not get some kind of something made out of stone or some weird thing. Tour of Britain's coming through St Just, I think, on 5th of September, and so they would like us to do something. It's quite, you know, it's a nice bit of publicity. That I don't know if you know, but they have that on the Tour de France. They used to have that the devil, you know, the El Diablo, Didier Selft or something like that. So we might be doing our own kind of little devil number there with angels opposite, and you know, so we've been trying to organise that. We've got 1 day's technical and dress for each play, and last time we had 2. So how that all manages to squash down, we haven't quite worked out. But one of the things we are doing, we're going to try and rehearse some of the big numbers in the plen separately. So the Noah's Ark, Moses and the Red Sea, the Last Supper, the Harrowing of Hell, the Ascension, those numbers. We'll see if we can just get a bit of a heads up with our ensemble, so we're not chasing our tail on those tech days and suddenly doing a dress rehearsal at midnight, and then to do a performance the next day. So those are all considerations. I think Mary Ann this evening's doing radio interviews, so things are gradually, the word hopefully should get around. We've been dealing with Cornish language film companies, so an actor's had to drop out, so we need to recast. We've got some dialect and accent workshops. We just sent a recording of a Breton character that Mark Trevethan from the Cornish Language Board did for us. We're talking about sound effects and lighting cues for the stage manager, new bits of Cornish translation, the souvenir brochure content, a query from Simon the Leper, so all sorts of things come in on a daily basis, which make it quite a challenge, but it's you just kind of tick the days off day by day. Just before we have any questions and answers, if you've got any, we do need people to come and see this. So the actors, well, everybody involved, the choir, the band, the choir, you can hear them rehearsing behind the Methodist chapel several times a week, and the band are in the Nut a couple of times a week, and the actors are even the Pleningroy or wandering through town to various rehearsal venues. So they've worked so hard. So if you can come and support us, that would be great, and come and see the plays. 4th to the 18th of September. Tickets are through Hall for Cornwall, and I think there's been a bit of confusion. People are saying tickets are £90, but that's a festival ticket. You get all 3 plays, souvenir brochure. You can go and see a variety of workshops. We've got a festival running alongside it, so that's the £90 one. But I think normal price ticket for seeing a play is £16, and if you live locally in the TR19 area, you can get them for 14 or something. A lot of the information is on St Just Ordinalia website, so just stjustordinalia.com, I think. But yeah, please do spread the word. Come and see these, because, like I said, the last time was 1969. We hope to put these on a cycle, but you just never know what funding climates are like. We would like them to be self-sufficient just on box office, but maybe just for the first few years, first few cycles, we might need a little bit of help with that. But yes, so that's pretty much me. I probably left loads of things out. There are, so many areas, but feel free to chuck some questions in if you would like to. I should say, shall I? Sorry, Amanda, sorry. I only had one thing to remember.